Has anybody ever tried to rate a tornado?
And I would like to know why you can never get to the end of a rainbow.
What's the worst disaster in Iowa?
What are your top 3 movies that involve weather?
Welcome to Weathered Questions, where we answer the questions on your radar.
Welcome into Weathered Questions, the podcast where we answer the meteorology questions on your radar. My name is Jan Kaj, joined by my co-host Kai O'Mara. We hope you're having a fabulous week here so far. And we're almost wrapping up March, heading into April. More spring-like weather, which means more spring-like and severe weather-related content for your favorite weather podcast. Well, we hope it's your favorite weather podcast. Regardless, thanks for listening. Kai, how things been?
Busy, per usual.
Yeah.
Endless supply of projects and things. And now that the weather is warming up, that means activities are back in session again. So after school stuff, extracurricular stuff, that's just the life of a dad right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. But between last time and this time, though, my oldest did turn 14.
Woo!
That means I've got to start looking up DMV rules and everything else and about driving. So I'm going to be kind of studying up on that a little bit and seeing where that's going to take me, because it's been a while since I've had to look that stuff up, because, you know, last time I had to do that was when I was 14. And so we'll figure it out. I'm not too worried. In this episode, though, well, yes, scary stuff, big stuff and scary stuff. And
you'll be fine. You'll do it.
Only 8 weeks left until I would officially have a high schooler in the home. So there I am. Yeah. Exactly. So, hey, we're going to get into the cloud of the week. This is really not that common of a cloud in the Midwest, but it is common in other parts of the world. So, Jan, take us away. What is up with this cloud of the week?
Yeah, so this cloud of the week, it's called a lenticular cloud. And you've probably heard us reference this kind of cloud a few other times here on the show, because it is a very unique one and very picturesque kind of cloud. Most recently, you may have heard us reference it very briefly when we talked about cap clouds a couple episodes back, 2 or 3 episodes ago. Because cap clouds are a type of lenticular cloud, but lenticular clouds are unique in and of themselves, and so I wanted to be sure that they got their own little spot in the spotlight. So if you picture like a contact lens, if that was a cloud, that's the shape of a lenticular cloud. So it's a very kind of a curvy cloud, and it can have a little kind of concave spot on it that basically, if you picture what that cap cloud was that we talked about forming over a mountain, where a cloud just kind of sits on top, it's that but removed from the mountain. So we can get these, again, literally like what I just said, a cap cloud that is able to shake free of that typography. However, we can also get these in other places, just, more or less flat ground compared to mountains, we'll call it, where you're getting ripples in the atmosphere, waves in the atmosphere, because the atmosphere, air is a fluid, right? Everything is moving around. You're getting these waves that as things are rising and sinking in the atmosphere, we can get these types of clouds to be able to form. They do look very cool. Sometimes they can kind of stack on top of each other. They look like a UFO. Sometimes people call them in as UFO sightings. That's happened before. If you get a lot of them stacked on top of each other, they can look like a stack of pancakes. They're just really cool looking, and just very, again, circular, very smooth. Sometimes you can kind of see some striations in them a little bit, but they're not rotating. So that is one thing, and they're usually just off on their own, right? They're just kind of this random circle cloud in the middle of pretty much nothing else. That's lenticular clouds.
Yeah, and to go a little bit of an expansion of what you said, just to make the visual a little bit better for those that may still be a little lost, because it's an oddball cloud. It's odd.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, it's hard to picture.
It doesn't move. That's the thing, is it doesn't move. It stays there. And the physical process is called a standing wave. And if you had, let's just say, a stream of water, and you had a small rock under the surface of the water and the water flowed over it every time, it would have to flow up and around it, and it would create a very steady wave over that. It wouldn't break through the water, but it would be a very steady wave. We can't really see the water that's always in our atmosphere unless we condense it out. And so as a result, something's causing that standing wave. Usually it's a topographical thing, like a hill or a mountainside or something. That's why they're so frequent out west versus the Midwest, which is really flat. But there's a persistent air current hitting that area, flowing up and then condensing. And so it's a constant condensation and then drying process. It's like let's just put it this way. You would not want to fly a personal Cessna plane, a personal aircraft right up next to one of those, because there is a lot of turbulence in there. It looks so cool from the ground, but it's a pretty turbulent environment to make that happen. So that's one way to visualize it. If it drives it home a little bit clearer for you, hopefully, that's imagine just a really shallow creek flowing over a rock and constantly creating that little wave shape in the water, because that's really how we have to treat our atmosphere, is like water, like a wave like that.
I think that visual, that turbulence thing is also very helpful because, a lot of people, you've probably maybe been on an airplane at some point, and so maybe you felt turbulence and you kind of know what that is, but maybe there wasn't really much around when you felt that turbulence, and so it's basically the visual of turbulence, right? It's the clouds actually condensing and creating something that you can see, whereas other times you're just flying through more or less clear air that is giving you turbulence, and so it's hard to picture, like, why is the air shaking the airplane? Well, there you go. You can see the actual waves happening there with that lenticular cloud formation.
Yep, that's it. You got it.
All right. So here's a question, Kai, that I got recently that I want to tackle. I did a school visit recently here in the Des Moines area, and one of the kids, this was a class of second graders, and we were talking all about tornadoes because kids love talking tornadoes. Adults love talking tornadoes too. So we talk about those a lot here on the program. But one of the kids surprisingly asked, how do tornadoes stop? And that was a question I hadn't had before, for at least for a little while. So I thought, hey, maybe everybody else listening wants to know a little bit more about. Okay, we talk a lot about how they start, how they form, what they need. How do they stop? What happens there?
Good question. I think the answer is still out there in the research community somewhere, most likely. But I think we could give a good try at a reasonable answer. So if the ingredients are there to start the tornado and the ingredients are maintained, then the tornado should be maintained. Mm-hmm. If the ingredients stop, then the tornado can dissipate very quickly or weaken very quickly. And maybe it comes down to what it's hitting, but chances are really good. It's almost like you need a perfect storm to get one going to begin with. And so I'm kind of inclined to think that maybe it'll interact with another storm, with an outflow of another storm, or maybe instead of the air going in an upward motion, maybe it hits the outflow of another storm and it's now in a downward motion and it doesn't get that perfect circulation that it requires. That's why a lot of times when you see these large supercells out there that kind of look like shrimp, I always educated kids during school talks. If you got a big plate of red lobster shrimp in front of you, like the coconut shrimp, like the good stuff, we don't eat the tails. Tails where the tornado is. The tornado's where the tornado is. Yep. And so it just moves east and there's nothing to impact it. That's the only storm in the system. It can gobble in however much air it wants. It's unlimited. The second you start to interact with other storms and you affect that inflow and outflow, very delicate balance, I'm guessing that's probably what causes it. But to be very frank, Jan, I don't know. I don't know. And I think the research community would lean that direction, but I don't know exactly, aside from the fact that the ingredients must not be as good as what they once were when it started, most likely.
Yeah, one of my favorite things when kids ask these kinds of questions is to say that's why we need, future, curious minds and future meteorologists like yourself, is to help us answer these questions, because we're still doing research. Tornadoes are still very much an enigma, even for as much as we know and as much as we have figured out. There is still a lot that we are learning as meteorologists about these monstrous storms and what feeds them, what what doesn't, why two seemingly identical looking storms, one maybe makes a tornado and one maybe doesn't. There's still a lot to learn there, but
That's the frustrating part.
yeah.
And that's the real frustrating part is you can have an identical storm on radar from week to week. And one week it produces, and another week it doesn't. And let's just put this into a very reasonable everyday application. Let's just say, right, for a hypothetical, 4 inches of snow falls overnight. Your local school district delays 2 hours. The next week, the exact same thing happens, but there's not a delay. Or you are watching a game of basketball. You see a clear foul right in front of the official, and they call it. Great. The exact same thing happens 1 minute later in the game. The exact same player, exact same angle, doesn't call it. Logically, you're sitting there going, this is inconsistent. Why is this inconsistent? Well, a lot of people are just quick to throw shade on those decision makers, whatever they happen to be, whether it's schools or officials. But in the research,
You can tell we're coming off of March Madness here.
Of course, exactly. But it is. It's one of those things that we see that kind of stuff. And I think us as human beings, we crave consistency, which is why we love routines. Yeah. And so when we see something inconsistent in the weather, especially people that dedicate their lives to predicting it, it's frustrating as heck to try and figure that out. And that's why we do need, researchers and people in the field doing all that stuff. And that's why I absolutely love NOAA's, the NSSL team down there in Oklahoma, the National Severe Storms Lab. I just think those folks are geniuses. And we cite their work in the work that we do. It's just great. But we need more of it. We need another 30 or 40 or 50 years of case studies to really get us into a better position to really know the answer to that question that was posed. What grade was that you got? That
was second grade.
That's awesome.
I know.
That's fantastic.
I know.
That is beautiful.
I love the kid questions and love the things that they're thinking about, right? But I do think you're right, Kai, in what you mentioned about maybe it's an outflow boundary, maybe it's something else. But the way that I explained it to the second graders, because if I started saying outflow boundaries and stuff, I'd lose them real fast.
Right.
The way that I explained it is that we have all these ingredients that we need for a tornado. We need wind, we need moisture, we need these very specific amounts of ingredients. Just like you are making a cake, you need these very specific amounts of each ingredient to actually get your tornado to form and to start. And if one of those ingredients, if we take it away and we don't have that right thing coming in anymore, whatever it is, if it's the wind, if it's the moisture, if it's the air pressure, whatever it might be, if we take that ingredient away, then our tornado can't keep going anymore. So that's how I explained it, was kind of, everyone likes making cupcakes with moms. So that's the route we went that day. I think that all plays into it though, right? Like if that outflow boundary impacts our system, then it's going to influence the wind direction or the wind speed or the moisture or the air pressure, or all of them, right? So I think that's the hardest thing, and why this research is so difficult is one tiny little thing might impact 5 other things. And so your control experiment, quote unquote, is being influenced by so many different factors all the time.
Don't ever make the mistake I ever did one day. I like that analogy better, actually, with the baking stuff.
Yeah.
But all the fellow husbands that are listening, don't ever walk through the kitchen with a preheated oven and think to yourself, why is that oven on? I'm going to shut it off.
Did you turn it off?
I was dead. I'm telling you, dead after doing that. So as much as I love all your ingredients, also let's make sure the heat's still on with the oven. Otherwise, you're dead.
Again, an important ingredient in tornado making.
And an important life lesson learned by me when that happened. So we're going to get into a true or false trivia question today. Speaking of heat and speaking of tornadoes, let's combine the two. Here's your true or false today. Tornadoes only happen when it is 80 degrees or warmer. True or false? Tornadoes only happen when it is 80 degrees or warmer. We are going to pause real quick. We're going to hear from Tim, the salsa guy, here in Cedar Rapids. Then we're going to give you a chance to think about that. We'll talk out the answer right after this.
Hi, this is Tim from Salsa Guy Cafe. We've got some exciting new menu items to share. Try our new full breakfast menu at the Blair's Ferry Road location, featuring scratch-made favorites like Crunchberry French Toast. Our best seller, the Alfalfa's Experience Deli Sandwich, is still a must-have, and we have to brag. Our Conquistador Burger was named one of Iowa's top 3 best burgers. Come try one on today.
Salsa Guy Cafe. We're not fast food, but we make great food first.
Today's trivia question.
Alrighty, hopefully you had a chance to think about that. Tornadoes can only happen when it's 80 degrees or warmer. True or false, Jan? What do you think?
False. I feel good about that one.
False is correct. Boom. False is correct.
Yeah.
So
common misconception that they have to be hot, which a lot of times it is warm. But we've both tracked enough storms where it has not been 80 degrees. It's been, in the 70s. I'm sure there's been a couple that have been cooler than that, but you typically don't go much too far below that. But you can get them in some surprisingly cold weather. And as we're talking here in the spring, maybe 70 degrees is like, oh, that doesn't seem that bad. But when you're in the middle of summer and typically getting all these storms when it is 80, 90 degrees, those 70-degree days in the middle of summer can feel quite chilly and not typical of our tornadoes, but they absolutely can happen.
Right. Well, and when I was in school and we were going through different severe weather parameters that we would look at, because as students, that's what we wanted to go after, right? We didn't want to chase hailstorms. We didn't want to chase straight line winds. We wanted to go chase tornadoes. And so we would look at the ingredients that we had. Keep in mind, this was before all the different high resolution models that you see today. We used big 40-kilometer chunk models to figure out our stuff, which is fine. That's what we had. We were really big on instability, which is a very common way to say, is it hot enough? Is there enough juice in the atmosphere to generate this? We were big on that because we didn't know any better. And the shear part, at least from what I can recall, was kind of a 50-50. What we mean by that is what the wind is doing with height. Is it changing directions and speed as it goes up? Because that is a critical component. But the general gist at that time was these big violent tornadoes need to be hot. It needs to be hot because you have to get that air rising quickly. Well, not necessarily. So November of 2005 came around in Iowa. And we're like, oh my gosh, we had a tornado outbreak in central Iowa. It was a big one. And now you see some of these cool season tornadoes in February, March, April that have been producing substantial damage. You think about the Michigan one that happened earlier in March. Substantial. It was not hot at the time.
Yeah.
It was not hot, but it took out entire structures. So our general thought after that was, all right, has to be more to this puzzle. Like there has to be. And so now we've generally figured out that wind shear is really the driving factor with tornadoes. And that's especially in the lowest 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers, which is lowest mile, basically, lowest half mile of what the winds are doing and how fast are they changing directions. Because if that updraft of the storm starts to spin quickly, that's a thing. And then the other part, Jan, too, is I think the humidity needs to be pretty high.
Yes.
So, if we have a 70-degree day and the dew point is 68, if you take that air and lift it into the atmosphere and cool it down, that cloud base where it actually hits its condensation point is going to be really low to the ground. And that's lesser of a distance for a tornado to travel. So whether it's 70 with a dew point of 68 or 55, the dew point of 53 in February, you might remember this. I think it was on, I think, I'm trying to remember it, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I'm pretty sure we had a tornado in Iowa.
Yep. That mid-January one.
Yes. It was in the 50s. And it damaged stuff. So, yeah, this is just a long-winded way to say that's false. But there you go. That's the explanation.
I'm thinking back to, was it 2024, end of March, the the Kyoto EF4s where we had twin
Yeah.
tornadoes, and
Yeah.
again, up to one of them was an EF4.
Yeah. Brutal.
So again,
Big.
big tornadoes, damaging tornadoes that they. I mean, obviously, recently we have had some pretty warm temperatures. We know we can also get very warm temperatures in March, and I'm not sure what the temperatures were like on that particular day off the top of my head. But again, all of this to say that it doesn't have to be your typical what you would think of as a
Right.
midsummer day. Tornadoes can happen any time of year, any time of day, and in a lot of different settings as well. So just always a good reminder to always be weather aware, regardless of what's going on, or what you might typically think of as normal.
I think we're going to jump ahead to another tornado part, and then we're going to end the show on some folklore fun today. What do you think about a tornado's path and topography? This came to us from a Kansas listener regarding topography. And the question is, can topography affect a tornado's path, since we're on the topic?
Yeah, since we're on the topic, yes and no.
Yeah,
it's gonna be
that's a good
gonna be
answer.
my answer.
Yep.
I think the if you have to make me pick one, I'm gonna say no. It cannot. Where tornadoes are happening, the what's steering them, that shear and stuff that we just talked about, that is all happening well up above the ground and up in the cloud base, and further up. What is actually driving that tornado doesn't care if there's a creek on the ground or a valley or something like that. That tornado is going to go where it wants to. So that is a very common myth, I would say, is that a river valley or is going to either protect us or it's going to follow the river valley or something like that. Now, to a very small degree, there was this Kansas listener. There was a recent tornado in Kansas, in the Kansas City area, that kind of followed along like a bluff for a little while. So maybe there is a very small, minute part that it kind of almost like ricocheted or bounced off a little bit. But I would say that that was more that the storm itself just happened to be following that path versus the tornado itself was steered by something.
And
Do you
it
agree?
maybe could go back to the ingredient conversation we had.
Yeah.
I wonder if that topographical feature, maybe it's a 40 or 50 foot high bluff, not huge, but something.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just enough to affect the airflow for just a second. And maybe it either weakens over you or maybe it steers it left by 1/10 of a mile. We know tornadoes can cross rivers. We debunked that myth decades ago.
Yep.
So that's not a thing. But rivers are also pretty flat areas to begin with, unless it's like really deep down. I mean, most rivers are pretty flat from bank to bank. Mm-hmm. So that's not necessarily unheard of at all. I'm thinking of like northeast Iowa, southwest Wisconsin kind of bluffs where they're real rocky and kind of tall. Some of those might affect it a little, but again, I don't know if it's so much the physical object as it is the inflow of wind going into it. That might
think that's
help
a really
to
good point.
push the forcing a little bit different, as opposed to just blocking it. Maybe it's causing a different eddy that we don't see, but the tornado is obviously having to deal with it because it's a whole engineering thing.
All of that to say, I would not count on
pressure.
it. Yeah, all of that to say, I wouldn't count on it protecting you by any means,
No.
in any way. So
I think yes and no is a good one for that one. If you live in the plains, probably not. If this is a case, though, where you are kind of in a bluffy area, maybe. And if that's the case, maybe it's, we look back at the La Crosse Weather Service office and maybe the Green Bay Weather Service office for various different tornado outbreaks and see if those paths and maybe line them up over a topographical feature and see if we can find anything. That might be
actually would be really interesting.
Yeah, and they keep all the records of that.
Sure.
Okay, final one here before we close it out. 2 pieces of folklore because we're looking ahead to Easter. We're looking ahead to Easter this Sunday. If you plant beans on Good Friday, they will not be killed by frost. That's number 1. Number 2, if it rains on Easter Sunday, it will rain for 7 Sundays in a row. What you think?
All right, so first one, Good Friday is going to be, one, it's different every year.
Yep.
What is the difference? I think it's like a 7 week difference that we can have or something like that, Kai.
Pretty broad.
For
Month and
Easter.
a half, roughly. Yeah, month and a
Yeah.
half.
So Good Friday is the same or is different every year, but it's also the same day for everyone in a given year. So from Miami, Florida to Anchorage, Alaska, or if you're one of our lovely people listening from outside of the US, it's again same Sunday. Or Friday, sorry, we're talking Friday, not Easter yet.
We'll
Point
get there.
being, I would say that this folklore came from, a lot of our folklore comes from like indigenous tribes or, like pioneers or stuff like that. I would say this is not necessarily a great one because if it's early March, I mean, we can still get some pretty decent snow and things that are not going to let rot your seeds or kill
Right.
your seeds. If you're waiting until too late in the year, if it's a later Easter, maybe you end up being too late. So I would say this one's probably not a great one to run with, and much better to go by general weather patterns and things like that.
Yep,
Than
your
the Good
local
Friday
climate's going to dominate that one.
Yeah.
If you're in Duluth, Minnesota, Good Friday is not going to work for you. If you're in Atlanta, Georgia, it probably does work for you. You're
Yeah.
probably going to be fine.
Yep.
The second one has to do really with weather cycles, if I look at things correctly. Just for
If it
reference,
rains on
if
Easter Sunday, it will rain for
Yep.
7 Sundays in a row, just as a reminder.
Yeah, that's a reminder of the folklore that we're on right now. And assuming that the weather pattern is in a fairly predictable state where it goes up and down and up and down and up and down, kind of a fun stat to think about is it takes about 3 to 4 days for a low pressure system to move across the country. So there's going to be oscillations in there. You're going to go up and then you're going to go down and up and go down. Well, 3 or 4 days times 2 is 6 to 8 days. So logically, if you get hit on that cycle on an Easter Sunday and it's a fairly predictable pattern, you'll have gone up and gone down and gone up, and then you're down again the following weekend, and then you're up and down again the following weekend. The thing is if we get into maybe a blocking pattern where it doesn't change for many days, but credit to that folklore, I've seen it happen a number of times. And if it's not exactly, 7, it might be 5.
Yeah.
But it gives a little leverage to that stability and weather cycles. And you can talk to most folks and say, yeah, remember that one time where it rained like every Thursday for 3 months? It happens.
Yep, that's what I was just going to refer to.
And these cycles can repeat. They can repeat over and over. And if you're in a stable weather pattern, that's actually a sign of a pretty healthy weather pattern. It's actually a good thing. So it doesn't mean that there's probably too much records going on, which we had a ton of in March. So that's a little bit about that one, Jan. So
yeah, I mean, you'll definitely hear people be like, it seems like every single Saturday it's been raining, or it's been so nice every Monday and we're stuck at work. Well, there actually is some truth to that we are getting those recurring patterns.
Take a day off. Go to the golf course then. We'll make sure it rains on the Monday you're supposed to go to the golf course.
Yeah.
Make sure you're taken care of. So, alrighty, you've now spent almost 28 minutes with us here on the Weather Questions podcast. Of course, we thank you very much for staying with us. Hopefully you learned something today. Have a terrific Easter Sunday. Have a great weekend, great holiday weekend. Hopefully you have a chance to see your friends and family as well. We encourage you, if this has spurred some conversation, maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes at the Easter table, you could talk about weather a little bit. And if there's one that eventually gives you a good family debate, we'd want to know about it. You can send it to us. You can email us at weatheredquestions@gmail.com to join in on the conversation. Have a tremendous Easter. We'll talk to you next week. Stay safe.